Welcome back. Well, today I am joined by Sandra Brown, who is here on behalf of Providence Mission Hospital. She is the regional manager of genetics. Well, Sandra, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And genetics has really been on the forefront in diagnostics for a while now, with the pandemic, and we have Dr. Fauci coming on and they talk a little bit about, diagnostics and genetics and how the vaccines work. And it's very exciting. But from your perspective, this is a whole different ballgame, what you're referring to, correct?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, learning about viral evolution is an important thing about just in our general communities becoming more fluent in genetics. And cancer is inherently a genetic disorder, a genetic disease, and understanding the genetics of cancer is an important basis in, being on the leading edge of providing cancer treatment and therapies and prevention and understanding of risk.
Well, exactly. And there's been so many advances over the course of the last probably 10, 20 years. And as we'll discuss later in our conversation, precision medicine is one of them. So very, very exciting stuff. So tell me a little bit about yourself. You're new to our community. Tell me a little bit about you.
I actually have been living in Dana Point and living in Orange County for about 12 years. I finished my master's degree in clinical genetics at UCI. So I've been here since then. And I love South County and really enjoy, have friends that live in Laguna Woods. So just really enjoy where we are lucky to live.
Yes, and I couldn't agree with you more. I just actually moved towards Dana Point. I've been living east for some time, and it is a lovely area for sure. So getting back to cancer and it's, genetic versus maybe, it's genetic, but also there are different cancer risks that are inherited. So genetically and inherited, is that kind of the same thing?
Not really, but yes. So there's a lot of terminology that people hear. You might hear terms like genetic, genomic, precision, targeted therapies. All of those have to do with a characterization or a molecular understanding of a patient's either risk of developing cancer or how their cancer, if they've developed a cancer, how that cancer might behave with a specific treatment, or maybe an identified targeted therapy would be best for that cancer. And so characterizing a cancer and characterizing risk is a part of providing genetic services.
Okay.
So when you think about inheritance, inheritance has to do with the germline. And germ cells are the cells that originated your being, started your development. When you have children, it's germ cells that you give to your children so that they develop their being. And so germline means what you have inherited, what the cells that came together to create you, what they inherently contained. And then as they developed your whole body, each of the cells in your body contains that genetic material. If you have inherited risk, it goes through the germline, so it is inherited. And the genetic change that might be increasing or changing your risk of developing specific cancers would be found in those cells. So when we look at the germline, we look at healthy cells because we want to know what are the healthy cells inherently containing that might increase your risk for cancer. And then we would know what type of cancer you might have risk for, and then how to best manage and prevent that type of cancer.
So how do you do testing on that, on the germ cells? Is that a blood test?
Yeah, so germ cells, or what I was saying is you just want healthy cells and healthy cells that contain DNA. So mostly we look for white blood cells. You can get white blood cells from your saliva. So a lot of times we just do spit collection because we're actually just isolating the white blood cells out of your saliva. You can also get white blood cells if you do a blood draw. So a blood draw is another way for us to obtain your inherited genetic material. Sometimes when we do a blood draw, we can do additional testing. We can look at the RNA as well. You don't have RNA in your saliva. So if we wanted to look more closely at your inherited genetic material, we could do a blood draw so that we can add an RNA analysis to that as well.
Is that generally something that you would do on a regular basis, or would somebody have to be predisposed to cancer, or maybe there was some sort of something might have been wrong with them and then you suspect it?
No, that's really the exciting part about, you said, the advances that we've had in the last 10, 20 years. Even the advances in the last year, or the advances in the last 3 to 5 years, have been amazing in the field of genetics. We are going to launch Genome for Me soon in Orange County by the end of this year. And that will be a population genomic study where anyone, independent of their family history, can do genomic testing, looking for inherited risk of cancer, cardiology, and some of the pharmacogenetic, which help us to understand what kind of drugs may be best metabolized or not metabolized by an individual. So that is something that is anybody can join in. Otherwise, when you look at the kinds of family history that you might have to indicate doing germline testing, typically insurance has criteria that need to be met. So you have to have some significance in your personal or family history, multiple people with the same type of cancer, cancers occurring at unusually young ages. For example, breast or colon or uterine cancer under the age of 50. There are other cancers that have a higher likelihood of being associated with inheritance. So all ovarian cancer, independent of age, all pancreatic cancer, independent of age, and all aggressive type of prostate cancer, including a what we call an aggressive or high risk prostate or a metastatic type of prostate cancer. All of those meet standard insurance criteria in, which allows a patient to have more access to genetic testing. But the other thing is that genetic testing has gotten so much cheaper because of the technological advances that even if you don't have coverage by your insurance, the out-of-pocket costs usually vary between about $100 and $250. So it's something that we can provide you with very high quality genetic testing at a reasonable price when you don't meet your insurance criteria.
Oh, really good news. That is great stuff. So once you have detected cancer through any of the means that you mentioned, then what? I mean, do you take a look at, obviously you take a look at what type of cancer, but even more than that, you look beyond what type?
Right. So sometimes when an individual is diagnosed with cancer, they've never analyzed their germline. So we don't know if they have specific inherited DNA changes that may be driving, or genetic changes that may be driving them to develop cancer. And that may also characterize the behavior of their cancer. So if somebody has a recent diagnosis, we still would offer them germline testing. And then depending on the stage of that cancer and what type of the cancer it is, they might also benefit from having the actual tumor sequenced. So when we look at sequencing a tumor, we're still analyzing the DNA, but we're not analyzing the healthy cells or the cells that you were born with. We're analyzing the damaged cells of the cancer, which will always have some kind of mutational profile. And we want to know if we can identify a mutational profile that gives us an idea of how to best treat a cancer. That gives us a lot of insight in how to best manage your care.
Yeah. Oh, that good stuff. And at some point in the future, I'd like to sit down again with you and let's really dive into some of that. And maybe you could show us some samples of what some of these results look like to us, because we don't usually get to see anything like that. So I think that would be really a great discussion. And just as we close, give me an idea of some of the new things that are coming down the road here at the Leonard Cancer Institute.
Well, as we learn about genetics and genomics, we're really staying on top of research, what kind of therapies or clinical trials may be available to a patient because of something that we've identified in their tumor that really hasn't met a standard of care yet. So we want to make sure that patients who have important characterization of their tumor, they also have access to these kinds of studies. So that's an important area of providing leading edge care that's precision oncology. We also are developing additional high risk management. So if a patient has never had cancer, or maybe they had cancer in the past or recently recovered from a cancer, but now we've identified that they have germline risk, meaning that they have some inherited risk. When you have inherited risk, you can have risk of developing a second or third cancer, or you've never had cancer, but now you know you have risk. So then how do we best manage that risk? So we're in the future, hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be providing high-risk clinics where we're managing patients who have high risk and providing something called liquid screening. So there's a way of doing a blood draw where the DNA of a cancer at a very early stage will be circulating in your bloodstream, and we can start to pick those up at earlier and earlier stages. So a liquid screening is going to be an important part of adding to your risk reduction, your prevention, and your management when you know that you have a high risk of developing cancer.
Anything to catch it early. That is awesome.
Yes.
Good stuff. Well, it was so nice to meet you, Sandra. Thank you so much for the information, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'd be happy to come again.
And we'll be right back after this.